Hello, everyone. This is criminal profiler Pat Brown, and this is Dear Profiler Pat. This is a place where I give advice. If you have any questions in your life you would like some advice on, please do contact me. Send me an email at profilerpat. Oh, that's not what I want you to send it to. Send it to profilerpatbrown@gmail.com and put in the subject line, Dear Profiler Pat, so I can find it and ask a question. I will keep your identity. I'm not going to give your name. And so often I answer your question, but I also broaden it sometimes for other people out there who have issues which might match up exactly, or they might be slightly different, but maybe I can help. So anyway, today, the question is, Dear Profiler Pat, how can I provide safety for my children while I'm traveling outside the country? And the letter writer here, or the emailer, do we write letters anymore? I can't remember the last time I wrote one. I do remember writing one when I was 19. I wrote my parents a letter from Africa, and I returned home before the letter made it. So they didn't have a great mail system I think it was 1973 or something. So I think a lot of countries in Africa have improved their mail situation, but now everybody uses email. So we don't have to write anymore. Anyway, here's the question. Dear Profiler Pat, I know you are an avid traveler, and that is true. I love traveling. As you can see from some of the pictures, this is I'm in India, in front of the Taj Mahal. And I'm riding a camel in Egypt. And this is up in Kashmir. The whole picture actually has my son sitting next to this guy and then another soldier, because Kashmir is kind of a volatile place with issues between Pakistan and India. So Kashmir is India, but Pakistan thinks it isn't. So there you go. And so these are the questions you're going to have is, what about safety for the children as I travel? So it says here, my husband needs to return to El Salvador sometime over the next few months to finally receive his green card. Yay. And since I can work remotely, we'd love to travel together with our two children, 4 and 1 years old, as the process may take 4 to 6 weeks from start to finish. My husband has some family we can stay with briefly, but they live several hours from the city, and he hasn't seen any of them in 20 years. So you have no idea what kind of people they are, really. That is something you have to be sure of when you're going to stay with people and you really just don't know what their situation is. So maybe you do know somebody who knows the situation. You can, really question them about where they live, what the situation is in the area they live, how safe it is, how far away from everything is it, So he hasn't seen them in 20 years since he moved to the U.S. So we'd like to be staying in the city where there is better access to hospitals. That is a real issue when you're traveling. It's just, where do I get medical care if I need it? And if your children need it. Although the situation continues to improve in El Salvador, yes, it does. I mean, that new president came in and cleaned up that country. So I know people from El Salvador, and they're like, you got to go visit now. It's great. So pretty cool. My greatest fear is my children getting sick or having an emergency situation and not being able to get them appropriate care, given the resources are so much different than where we live in the U.S. Did you ever take your children outside the country to Jamaica? Yes, I did take them to Jamaica, or anywhere else. Most of the time when my kids were growing up, we didn't have much money. So mostly I drove to Minnesota and one time to Canada. So I wouldn't consider that so much outside the country. But yes, we did go to Jamaica. And once my kids grew up, my daughter came and visited me when I was in Egypt. My son went and lived in India for a year. And also he lived in Mexico for half a year. And my kids have traveled quite a few countries. And so, yeah, they're travelers. So at least 2 out of 3 like to travel more than my other one son is not as into it. But, and they still have those questions, even as adults. And especially as a mom who's watching her adult child, maybe an 18-year-old, going off, and you wonder, are they safe? Can they get care if they need it? Are they in a dangerous area? How do I know? So, yeah, get it. I get it. So, yes, I've taken them places. And so any tips? Thanks, Pat. Okay. So, first of all, let's look at this. Um, I think it's great that you're going to go. You want to go to El Salvador, spend some time in your husband's country. The kids, they're 4 and 1. They won't give a crap. let's face it. They won't know the difference. Now, the 1-year-old definitely, I mean, all it cares about is you holding it, and feeding it. The 4-year-old, sure, the 4-year-old can enjoy things around their little bodies. That they're gonna enjoy those. Hold on a second, I gotta take this off because the green screen is acting funny on my shirt and it's driving me crazy. Anyway, a 4-year-old, they're not going to get into the culture. They're not really going to understand that. The food may be a little weird for them unless you eat El Salvadorian food at home, which quite frankly is really good. So maybe your child already eats that food, and so visiting will be great. They'll just eat the food. What does a 4-year-old like? Well, whatever the 4-year-old likes here is what they're going to like there. Playing outside, playing with a ball, playing with an animal, playing with other kids. And culturally, they're not really going to get into it or remember it. So that makes a difference in choosing where you're going to take a child as far as comfort, not just safety, but comfort. My kids, when they went to Jamaica, were, I think, my boys were 8, and my daughter was 10, I believe. Now, I do remember that one of my sons, when you talk about where you want to go to, as far as safety and medical stuff, that trip that my husband and I and the kids took to Jamaica, we went to visit his relatives, and they're up in the mountains, and so it's quite a little trek up there, and beautiful when you get up there. Very little electricity. Most people are yam farmers. Poor, very poor. Everybody wanted some money, So, yeah. And so now my kids, who were old enough to go, this place is strange. They had interesting levels of comfort and discomfort. They'd been around a lot of Jamaican relatives, so they were comfortable with just the way they presented themselves, because they're kind of loud people, and they like to laugh a lot and joke, and they're very huggy and friendly. So that was all cool. Now they speak in Jamaica, they speak patois, especially up there in the country. And my kids probably didn't understand a good portion of what anybody said. So that could make them a little uncomfortable. Your 4-year-old, I don't know if your 4-year-old is speaking Spanish, but again, the kid's 4, so you can kind of monitor everything the 4-year-old does. And probably the 4-year-old won't care that much that the other people may not speak the language he's speaking, or that he understands them. For my 8-year-olds and 10-year-old, it was a little rough, I think, because children would come up and they would try to talk to them, and they're like, sometimes not getting it. And then it's hard to socialize properly and feel included. I know that one of my sons felt sad for one of the children because he didn't have any shoes. So tennis shoes. So he gave him his tennis shoes. He said, "Mom, I wanted to give him the tennis shoes because I felt so bad for him." I'm not sure he just didn't want new tennis shoes. So I'm not sure if he was just being clever, but he did seem sincere at the time. They felt bad for this kid, who was a relative of some cousin or whatever. And it was true. The child, they were quite poor. So, and we stayed overnight, and they were kind of creeped out because it was very dark, because there was no electricity, and just it was a somewhat poor area. And since the kids were old enough to look around and see poverty, that was a little unsettling for them as well. We did not stay long. I can't remember how long we were up there. Maybe one night, maybe 2 nights. It wasn't really long. And I know there was one television set at one person's house, and some people gathered, and my kids gathered. So I think it was a good experience for them, but it was a short experience. And I think if I was going to go to 4 to 6 weeks at that age, I don't think I'd take my kids there for 4 to 6 weeks. I think that would be a little tough. I think they wouldn't have enough to do. Would they be able to really get in with the kids there so they shared something that they could do together? Obviously, it's a soccer ball in Jamaica, El Salvador. Yeah, kicking the ball around, my boys would be into that. I don't know what I think my daughter would have had a harder time actually at 10, trying to get along with the girls. She's the American, So sometimes you have to look at the comfort level of the children. Are they just going to be relaxed there? Will it be a challenge or will it not be a challenge? So, all of you out there, if you're taking your children places, sometimes it's good to give them a challenge. I'm not saying you shouldn't, but you just want to understand that there is going to be a challenge of some sort. The older they are, the more of a challenge there's going to be. And depending on where you're staying, they may or may not have a lot of options. So, way up in the country, in the mountains, not much options. If they were in the suburb cities and people have more money and their swimming pools and places to go, it might be a different matter. So you have to really consider those things. Now, to talk about the health issue, up on that on that mountaintop there in Jamaica, if somebody got sick, I don't know where you go. I mean, I can't even think where the nearest hospital would be. I think the location of my husband's family was halfway between Mondeville and Kingston. I'm not. No, I know. I do know where they would go. Okay, so actually, probably the nearest town from that location might be a 15-minute drive or something. I don't know what kind of facilities they had in that town. I haven't looked at that in years. I don't know what they had back then. So kind of you're crossing your fingers and just going, hope nothing goes wrong. I mean, people do live in these places and if they need medical help, they have to go to where they can get that medical help at. And it depends what the situation is. Is it something mild? Is it literally an emergency? Are we talking about something like, if kids feeling got a little fever or something, has got, a little sick, it's not something serious. They sprain their ankle, you just find a piece of cloth and make an ace bandage out of it. There are things you can do that aren't, if it's not a critical issue, you can deal with. And if they have time, you can, get in your car and go to the nearest medical facility and that'll be okay. But you have to, to be comfortable, you want to look into what your issues are and how much of a risk you want to take. For example, in India, if you're out in some very isolated locations in India, you're not going to find a facility for it's going to be a long way. And if you're in the city, let's say you're in Mumbai or Delhi or a big huge city, the hospital may not be that far away, but the traffic is terrible. Can you get to the hospital in the traffic? So you have to look into that. You'll find that an awful lot of places have smaller clinics, and there are actually more clinics in some countries than we have. Like here, we have some, emergency places, but sometimes when you go there, you have to wait like 4 hours to see anybody. And some places you do have to drive quite a distance even to get to one of those. So some countries have a lot of these little clinics everywhere, and you just walk in and you got some money, they'll see you in a heartbeat. And so you can get all kinds of things taken care of, medications or whatever you need. And they're also not as picky about giving them to you. So it can be easier. So, looking into where you're at, just check how many, what kind of situation you have with hospitals and clinics. And so, yes, would the city probably be easier to access all those things? Yes. But then there might be some smaller, not that you don't have to be in the capital, you can be in some smaller cities, and they offer quite a lot as well. But you can look that, I would Google the crap out of before I go. So obviously you want your kids to be relatively safe. Some people worry about food poisoning, Delhi belly, Montezuma's revenge. Can that happen? Sure. I've never gotten sick in India ever, and I eat street food all over the place. And but I went down to Tijuana with a fellow, and I ate the street food. He ate the restaurant food, and he was sick as a dog. It's so weird. The healthy food is, generally kids are pretty resilient, and sometimes they could get something, but again, a lot of hydrate them as well as possible, and they usually get over it even without medications. So, I think most of the time that's probably too much of a worry. Now, if you're going to go someplace where, let's say you're doing some kind of work in the world and you're going off to a place that has yellow fever, cholera, there's a bit of a different issue. It's like if you've got a region which is there's a lot of serious diseases in that region, a lot of malaria, just all kinds of things you can get. Bilharzia, almost thought I got bilharzia in Africa, and that's like schistomiasis. It's where you drink the water and it goes into your brain and kills you, or you go blind. And I was staying up in this village, this chief village, in a place called Chichau in Togo, and there were these ladies. There were these rain barrels where the rain came in, and we drank from the rain barrels. And then one day we saw the ladies in the village come, and they're pouring water into the rain barrels, and we're like, and I did not speak Cabre, which was the language. And I said, "Is that from the rain?" They're like, "No, it's from the river." And then we're like, "Oh my God, we're all going to die." So I'll go blind. So, there are those issues. And so you want to be careful about those kind of things. I would also recommend that if you're traveling, watch out for your feet, because I got a blister from a shoe I was wearing, and I was in Morocco, and I went in some bathroom, and then later that I went out the next day, and I went dancing with this fellow, but I was out there for like a couple hours, and I couldn't hardly stand up. I couldn't walk, and so I got back to my hotel. He actually carried me up to my room and left me there. Asked if I wanted to go to the hospital, and I stupidly said no. And then I looked at my foot, and it was stiff, and there was a red line coming up. I'm like, oh my God, I have blood poisoning. So I did the smart thing, stuck my foot in the bidet because I had cold rushing water, and I just kept it in the bidet for a long time, hope it would kind of clean out whatever. I'm not saying it was bright. How old was I? 23 or something. And then then I put my alarm on. I went to bed and hoped I didn't die. So that was the way. And then I woke up I put the alarm on just for a short time. So when I went to sleep, I'd wake up more quickly than waiting for morning, when people might be mourning, so I woke up and it was gone. So I was like, oh, that's good. So, but yeah, be careful of your extremities. And be careful of you could be somewhat cautious of food and water. Of course, in a lot of countries, they just don't drink the water. So don't drink the water. Drink bottled water, drink bottled soda. Be careful what you buy. Like you can get some, oh, look at that. It's a ice. What did I buy? I think I was on a bus, and they sold this ice cream, but it was actually just ice. it was, what did they do? I think they put ice and then put some chocolate sauce on top, chocolate syrup on top, and it looked like chocolate ice cream. It was actually just ice with that. But I started eating, and then I realized, oh my God, it's ice. That's probably shouldn't have eaten that. So I've eaten a lot of and drank things I probably shouldn't have done in certain countries. I've just been very lucky. So, but be cautious of those things. So safety for your children for that. And then you want to take a look at the issue of crime and terrorism, which of course is a problem when you're traveling. And, do you want to take a child into a region where it's risky? And the problem with that is that, well, a lot of people exaggerate things as far as criminal stuff. Like if you go to Mexico, for example, I've been to Mexico many times. I never had any fear in Mexico. People were great. Yeah, I know the cartel's rolling around, but not where I was. I wasn't in locations where the cartel was. So I did want to check to make sure I wasn't going to those particular locations where there's been troubles. So being in locations where there's lots of just happy people, I love Mexico City. There's other little cities in Mexico I just adore. I'm not a Cancun person, so I don't, I mean, you can go to Cancun, but so you can take your kids to the Maya Riviera and go to any one of those towns and probably be fine. And once in a while you'll hear somebody got shot, but that happens in the U.S. too. And stay away from dealing drugs, buying drugs, taking drugs, skeezy looking places. Don't go there, and don't take your kids there. One of my rules always is with children, and myself as a female, always go with those women and children. You go someplace as all male, you got problems. You go someplace where there's women and children, families, you're probably pretty well off, because they're not going to take their kids if it's a crappy place to go. So stay with other women and children. And the men can be there too, but just be sure it's a more family oriented, and just check the region to see whether there's any real bad problems going on. And generally speaking, as a tourist, well, you're not really a tourist if you're going there with your husband. You're sort of half belong to the country. And if you even as tourist, I've never had any trouble, but you can get in trouble. You can do stupid stuff and make yourself a target. Driving is an interesting issue in some countries. I've known there's a few cases where people have gotten killed driving in some isolated location. I have driven all over Mexico. I've driven in Nicaragua. I've driven in Costa Rica, Jamaica. I've driven all. I won't drive in India because it's crazy driving. That's a place you just jump in a rickshaw, grab yourself an Uber. You don't drive. It's not worth it. You can hire a car for the day for $20, $30. So, and it comes with a driver and gas. So good deal. But again, you want to look at just what the issues are, and as long as you're staying, and it's again where people are, witnesses, to me is extremely important, because when you have witnesses, that's not the most likely place for something to happen. Criminals don't usually attack in the middle of the day with witnesses around. I mean, if you're driving in an area where there's other cars driving, they're probably not going to get knocked off the road. So generally speaking, I say witnesses. Maybe you travel by bus. Other families are on the bus. That's pretty good. I've traveled by bus and train all over the world. I'm good with that, and that can be a nice experience. So these are the things I would look at. Oh, I didn't address terrorism. Right now, I don't think Salvador is really a terrorist place, but India can be, and Kashmir definitely can be. My son did almost get knocked off in a terrorist attack when he was in Jaipur. And he had just arrived in Jaipur. I had flown home. We had done a little travel. He was going to school there, and I flew home. And I told him to go check out the tourist stuff before he started he was doing some volunteer work there on his summer vacation. I said, well, be sure you see this great area because it's beautiful stuff and palace and everything. And I told him to do that, and he promised me he would. And the next day, when he should have been touring that, I was sitting in a nail parlor, and all of a sudden it came up on television and said, bomb blasts in India. And there's a map comes up with this big bullseye on Jaipur. I'm like, oh my God, in the tourist district, 90 people have been killed. I think it had 7 bicycle bombs or something like that. 90 people were killed that they knew of at that moment. I call my son, can't get hold of him, freaking out. Finally, I do get hold of him, and I said, were you down there? And he said, no, but now we're sort of just being told we have to stay in this one spot. I said, well, what were you doing? And, because you weren't down there. He goes, oh, I was just playing video games. And I'm like, oh, thank God for once my son didn't listen to me. Yes, play those video games. So I don't think he ever did get to see the stuff that I wanted him to see, but he wasn't dead. So that was good. But, I've traveled a lot of places where Egypt, they've got terrorists. Sometimes I left right before they had the revolution. I was out of there only 2 days before the revolution started. So look at your politics. Look at what the risk factors are. And again, if you take India, and are there terrorist attacks in India? Yes, there are. But it's a massive country. And you could be the unlucky schmuck that happens to be in the marketplace when the bicycle bombs blow up or whatever happens. But you can be in the United States when some guy unloads in a mall and kills 10 people, runs them over at a parade. We have our own mass murder / terrorist type attacks in the United States. So what do you do? Do you never go to a parade? Do you never go to a mall? Do you never go anyplace? So it happens. If I looked at how much it happens here and then look at India, I don't know that I find that much of a difference. So when you're traveling, you be proactive and doing your research and figuring out where you're comfortable, where it feels safest to you, where your children will be happy. They got things to do. Maybe you want to be someplace where you have something to do. Good internet. If you're going to work remotely, you can't be out in some country house. You don't have any internet. So you're going to have to find a place with good internet and as stable as it can possibly be if you're working. And you want to be someplace where if you're, you might be able to walk down to a cafe, take your children out to the park. Because I know, like when I'm in Mexico, I just love the parks. The parks are fabulous in Mexico. They're just like they're every place. So, you just constantly run into a park and it's great. And so there's things for the kids to do there and the animals to see and the birdies and, whatever places you could take your kids to play with other kids. Well, the other one. But yeah, that's what I would do most. And as far as seeing the relatives, if you see them early on, you might want to go visit them, check out, make sure the area is okay. Um, get yourself a place. Maybe just do, depending how close it is to the city. You said how long? How far away is it? It says here several hours. So that's quite a distance. Maybe if there's a really cool things to see along the way, and you might want to take a few day trip or something, and you drive there and you stay overnight, maybe one night. I don't know if anything else is in the area. One night, 2 nights, and if it's just the best thing ever, and you just wish you could stay longer, then you can make that choice then. But otherwise, you have your place in the city and you go back to it. So because you don't know the people yet, but it could be a great experience. Not again for you and your husband, not so much for the little ones that won't care. But if you have older kids, they're 8, they're 10, they're 12, they're 14. You got to look at each one of their levels of interaction with where you're going. A teenager, do they even want to be there? You know, what is their experience going to be? Now, my granddaughter, she's now 10. She has traveled to England, Ireland, and Italy. So she has done some traveling, and she enjoys traveling. But my daughter, they meet with friends in that country, and so she has friends her age that she's actually traveling with. So she's not just with the parents sitting in the backseat of the car like, I'm bored. So that helps too. So you really have to just look at what your kids are like. What are they interested in? And is the area you're going to, does it have something they would enjoy? Because you could find places where there's a whole lot of cool stuff to see, but nothing that your kids want to see. It's like, just because you think it's cool, like, oh, there's this big church, Notre Dame. Kids are like, whatever. It's a big building. So is that interesting to them? Would this be interesting? Yes. Would a 12-year-old think it would be cool to ride a camel? Probably. That would be interesting. So you have to look at their ages and decide what excites them. Would it be adventure type things, active things? Would they enjoy the food? Would they enjoy cultural stuff? Would they think that's really neat? So you have to figure out what your kids are like and try to plan a trip that addresses both your needs, the other adult's needs, if you're going with another adult, your kids' needs, and plan a trip that when everybody comes home, they're happy they went instead of everybody being freaking miserable, for one reason or the other. But anyway, those are my thoughts on safety and comfort, and hope that helps some of your decision making when you go to El Salvador. And that's one of the countries I have not been to, and have not been there. Those I have just let's see, I've been to Belize, Guatemala, Nicaragua, Mexico, and Costa Rica. So I'm missing still. I have not been to El Salvador or Panama. So as far as Central America goes, so I do hope to get there at some point, because now it seems like Salvador is a good place to go. So do enjoy yourself, and for everybody else, do enjoy traveling. Find ways to do it. I'm going to have a lot more travel videos talking about comfort, and as far as how do you literally travel, like airplane, train, bus. How are you going to do this in these different countries, and all kinds of different issues I will address. Send those emails to me, so you can ask me about travel. You can ask me about, I have different playlists, so check those out. Relationships, getting older. I call it getting older because if you're 30, you might be worried about becoming 40. And if you're 60, you're worried about becoming 70, and, so on and so forth. Some people I could call it aging, but I like calling it getting older. And, but you can ask me any question and I'll see if I can answer it. And I look forward to those emails. And I will see you later. Check me out next time that I show up. And again, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and click the bell for notifications. Almost always forget to say that. Bye-bye.